Welcome to Beyond the Bee, an ongoing dialogue about the past, present, and future of the B Corp movement. Co-hosts Emmy Allison and Ryan Honeyman facilitate an open and honest conversation about the B Corp movement, advise companies on how to increase their impact, and provide a deep dive into the new B Corp standards that are shaping our community.
I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner at Lyft Economy, and I'm here with Douglas Lamont. Douglas is the CEO or Chief Chocolonely of Tony's Chocolonely. He joined Tony's in October 2022 after 15 years at Innocent Drinks, including 9 years as CEO. At Innocent, Douglas helped more than double the company's turnover while strengthening its commitments to people and planet, including becoming a certified B Corp, committing to reach net zero by 2030, and pledging 10% of profits to charity. Douglas is also co-chair of the Better Business Act, a coalition of more than 3,000 businesses and organizations seeking to change UK company law so that directors align social and environmental impact with shareholder returns. Douglas, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So Douglas, you spent 15 years at Innocent, including 9 as CEO before Tony's. And can you tell us a bit more about your background? Like, how did you first get into this social impact work and a little bit of your journey?
Yeah, I started in corporate finance, so not an obvious starting point, but I guess the story goes a bit further back than that. My parents were both entrepreneurs. They ran their own company together, sort of a computer software business back in the 80s. And so I think I grew up around what I would call entrepreneurial small business, listening to that being talked about every day. And so I kind of knew I wanted to be in business. I just didn't know what that meant. I guess the thing that did seep in from that time was they were very much about the culture of the company and the kind of family feel for the employees. And my dad in particular spent a lot of time thinking about that and talking about that. So that kind of from a kind of type of company, type of culture seeped in. And then, I was in the corporate finance for the world for a bit. And then the dot-com boom came around and I was in the dot-com world for a bit. But again, in an interesting culture, fast growing culture with a brand in the UK that was kind of one of those groundbreakers, as it were. But I always loved food and product and the real thing. So I wanted to join a kind of FMCG kind of food business. And a friend of a friend knew someone at Innocent. And so I think the sort of full picture came together when I joined Innocent. And the founders had a very clear vision about, even before the sort of B Corp days, people, profit and planet, and building a company that they could be proud of, that they could sit in their rocking chairs and say, yeah, I built a good company. And the sort of, if you like, the sustainability angle, considering they founded it in 99, was sort of front and center for them. And when I joined in 2006, it was becoming sort of much more visible to everybody that things needed to move on. And so I kind of drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, of the total package. And from that point on, I'd be very clear about the types of companies I want to be involved in and that balance between people, profit and planet, and proving that you can scale those types of companies really successfully. That's sort of, I guess, what I get out of bed for every day.
Yeah. And how did you come across the B Corp movement? Did you bring it to Innocent or did someone bring it to you?
So I took Innocent into B Corp, and obviously at that point we'd already been acquired by Coca-Cola. So we were a subsidiary of Coca-Cola. So it wasn't an obvious sort of, is this possible? But we operated under this kind of principle of connected, not integrated. It made sense for the brand. And from that point of view, Coca-Cola were a very sensible long-term shareholder. They were very clear on why they bought the business because of what it stood for and the fact that it was giving them a chilled capability in Europe. And so they were supportive of me taking it into B Corp and felt like it was a good way to strengthen the brand and something that they could learn from. So yeah, that's what I did. I guess through being around other challenger brands and other people that had joined and a good few friends that were part of the B Corp movement so this was back in 2017 when it was still pretty early days in the UK. Yeah, I got clear that it was right for Innocent. And so, yeah, we took us into B Corp at that point.
Fantastic. Well, maybe switching to Tony's, I think majority of people know what Tony's is, but just in case, could you just describe Tony's Chocolonely and what you all do?
Yeah, so we describe ourselves not as a chocolate company, but as an impact company that makes chocolate, not a chocolate company the other way around. So for me, what's really important is, our founders were journalists. They were investigating child labor issues in the supply chain back in 2005. And they therefore discovered the issues as journalists and really tried to persuade the bigger companies through their journalism, through the TV program they were making, to say, why haven't you done something about this? Why don't you do something about it? And got a bit of a blank wall. And so as part of that, they upped the game and in the end started to do it for themselves. But as a demonstration, as a gimmick to some extent, and then these bars started selling and then the business took off. And so, we like to say that the impact happened first and the business happened by accident, but it's always been very much focused on how do we drive change in the cocoa industry. Our mission promises together we end exploitation in cocoa. That's what we're about first. I'm CEO of the mission, but we have this brand that obviously is a vehicle for creating demand for cocoa to allow us to build a model to drive change in the industry.
What is the sense of what you were able to do at Innocent within the subsidiary structure versus Tony's now? Is it night and day of like what's possible, or how would you compare?
I think in both cases, context is really important. And in both cases, I've been lucky that in the case of when we were founder-led at Innocent, we had the freedom to think about the long term. But Coca-Cola didn't really change that for us in a way, because we were a relatively small part of their business and we were quite a different model, that they gave us the freedom to think long term and to build the business the right way. So we didn't get sucked into the kind of short-termism that some people then will describe. So I felt very privileged and lucky. I mean, it helped. We were hitting our numbers and we were growing and the brand was strong and all the rest of it. But I think that Coca-Cola were very respectful. So they acted like a long-term investor and believed in what we were building as a brand. So that was really good. Equally at Tony's, I have a blend of sort of original founders, other people, and then private equity, but it's a family fund who, again, is an evergreen fund who prides themselves on the company called Verlinvest, building businesses the right way. And again, giving us the freedom to think long term, to build the business the right way. Yes, you've got to build a business. This isn't a chocolate distribution charity, but giving you that sort of long-term context. So, for example, during the current cocoa crisis, where costs go hugely up, lots of really strong conversations about, okay, yeah, but are we building things for the long term? We can take a hit on profit or we can take different choices in the short term as long as we're building the business the right way over the long term. And that's a really important context for a business, because if it always just keeps coming back to, yeah, but you promised this number next quarter, hit it come what may, it's very difficult to then make the right trade-offs around people, profit and planet. So shareholder context, shareholder relationship is key to how we build these types of businesses.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great segue into this mission lock structure that Tony's has. So Tony's has been a B Corp, I think, since 2013, pretty early days.
Yep.
And has had mission language embedded in its governing documents. And so what was the sort of process that came to, okay, we need to do something additional, and sort of what specific future were you looking to create with this mission lock structure?
Yes,
and maybe explaining what it is as well. Sorry.
Yeah, so the mission lock is an independent structure that we have 3 mission guardians who have a golden share in the company, and their sole role and responsibility is to make sure that we, as the directors of the company, stay true to the mission as defined in the Articles of Association. And if at some point we want to change those articles and the rules governing what the mission is, they have to approve them, and they can't be changed unless they approve them. So, you can update them, you can hopefully improve them, but with their approval. So that is a good mechanism. Outside of that mechanism of not being able to change the founding document, so to speak, they have rights to sort of escalation. So if they think, well, you're not following the written rules, they can first of all request information. In our annual report, which is very sort of detailed, transparent reporting, they have 2 pages that they can write what they like. So if they disagree with all the things that we're saying, they have the freedom of the pen to kind of put in there and say, well, we disagree. We think they're going off track or they're doing this, whatever. So that's one thing. And then it escalates up to sort of ability to publish in newspapers, and then ultimately up to the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, which is a kind of arbitration body in the Netherlands, to say, okay, we're disagreeing. You provide a ruling on are they or aren't they in line. So there's some fairly significant escalation that hopefully we never have to entail. The reason we did it, and again, it was being discussed before I joined, but was enacted while I was there, and I'm very supportive of it, because as you transitioned away from what I would call the original founders, and Henk Jan, who wasn't a founder, but he bought a big chunk of the business early on and did an amazing job growing the company from kind of 1 million to 100 million, everybody wanted reassurance that whatever then happened over multiple generations of shareholders, that the kind of core ideals of the mission and tackling exploitation in cocoa were going to remain, and our 5 sourcing principles, which are at the heart of what we do, somebody wasn't going to unwind those just because we built a cool brand. And so it just gave that double lock protection. And again, myself as an employee joining the company, I don't want to work 5 or 10 years, my backside off, to build something for someone else to come and undo. So again, I think it's reassuring for the types of people we attract as well to know that, you know, we've built on other people's works and other people will follow us and build on our work, and it's all leading to that long term, because we know this mission doesn't get solved in a year or 2 years. This is, 20 years, 30 years of work. And so having the confidence that that consistency will be there and that commitment is just powerful.
Yeah. And so just to go a little deeper on the actual structure. So are the 3 guardians, is there a trust that they have?
So there's effectively exactly that. The share sits in an independent trust that they are effectively the directors of. They have the say. And then whilst we appointed the first 3 and, tried to get that right, they have the right to then appoint their successors. So what you can't then do is fill that body. A future shell will say, oh, well, great, I'm firing you and I'm putting 3 of my friends in there. From the minute of the first appointments, the appointment renewal sits independently from the company. So the shareholders don't get to determine who the new board are in the future. So it is independent. What I think, though, is it is quite tightly scoped and defined. So it relates to one section of the shareholders agreement. It doesn't broaden out to you can have an opinion on everything and anything related to the company. So it's your job is to, in simple terms, protect the values and the 5 sourcing principles and sort of have an opinion on those, but not everything. So I think the key to these things is have them tightly enough defined that everyone's clear on what square those people are playing on and what they're not playing on, rather than a second board, because having too many layers of governance also slows you down and creates frustrations and all the rest of it. So they're very much not a second board. I have 2 meetings with them a year, in general, and if something pops up, then we'll have another conversation, but it's fairly light touch if everything's running smoothly.
Right. So if, for example, if the company was to say, oh, we're going to drop 2 of the 5 sourcing principles, could they say, besides writing in your annual report and newspaper articles, and it sounds like the Dutch Chamber of Commerce is the arbitration, could they force the company to change? Do they have that power?
Yeah, in effect, that Dutch arbitration, which is sort of a bit stronger than some countries, and it's sort of different by different countries, obviously. If we then, as the company, certify them, you'd be in real brand damage territory. I mean, whether ultimately, so the escalation powers are basically, do you really want to go there? Do you really want to take that pain? I mean, I think it's okay in the end if you did disagree and you would then defend it, but you're taking the pain if you really believe that strongly in it from a kind of escalation point of view. So it's pretty powerful, because if particularly a purpose-led brand that's going out saying we're this thing, and then the 3 people that are there to protect it are saying no, you're not, you're the opposite, you've got a sort of PR crisis, for want of a better word, on your hands that you need to think about, articulate, and hopefully come to a sensible compromise. I mean, we're not in that situation, and I don't envisage being in that situation, but that's the sort of protection mechanisms, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it would be terrible for the 3 mission guardians to be in open war with it. So yeah, even if there's not quite the sort of same legal teeth as other things, it still is effectively quite effective.
Again, and that Dutch Chamber of Commerce thing has got a fair amount of bite to it as well.
Yeah, fair enough. For Tony's open chain, or maybe just, could you mention the 5 sourcing principles and then also talk about this sort of broader movement around Tony's open chain for folks who don't know? Yeah. So
the 5 sourcing principles basically are rules for how we've built our supply chain model to drive impact. There are sort of the principles starts with traceability. So it's kind of know where your cocoa is coming from and be able to follow it all the way through the chain so that you know your farmer, sort of step 1. Second one, pay your farmer a higher price based on a living income reference price. So independently set by fair trade and others, much higher than the fair trade price, interestingly, but independently set living income price that we commit to. So in good days, bad days for the company, the farmer knows that they're going to get paid that for their cocoa. The third principle is kind of strong farmers. Mainly what that means is you've got 2.5 million smallholder farmers in West Africa, all disaggregated. And what we tried to do, and others, to be fair, is help them set up strong cooperative structures. So a collection of them come together, form a little business, and we try and empower them and support that governance, how they set those up well. The most important part of that is then the next principle is for the long term. We give those cooperatives 5-year contracts where we make a commitment that not just for this season, for next season, or when you decide to sell to us, we'll give you that higher price for 5 years. They don't have to sell to us though. So if someone else comes and offers them a higher price, great, you can sell to them. So it's not a two-way commitment, it's asymmetric in their favor. So again, it's creating a business, it's creating a choice for them, but it does create long-term commitment. And why that long-term commitment is important for two reasons. The kind of fifth sourcing principle, which is quality and productivity. We want them to have the confidence to reinvest in their farm, to do pruning effectively, to do disease management. And again, we help them with programs. But if they know they're getting that higher price multiple seasons in a row, they go, well, it's going to be a good investment because if I can drive up my yield and get a good price for it, I can drive myself towards a sort of living income. Not that that's how they would describe it, but out of poverty, quite frankly. And so it's that combination. And clearly that the other thing that does is hopefully create sufficient income for the family that they can send their kids to school and not have an employer hired labor rather than have their kids do the labor. There's 1.5 million kids working in child labor, not because the family want them to work in child labor. It's because when harvest time comes along or key times of the season come along where there's lots of work to do, the kids have to do the work because they can't afford to hire anyone. And it's a cash crop, right? So they need the cash. That creates a cycle of poverty because then the kids don't go to school, they don't learn, and they don't come out of that poverty trap. So again, child labor, whilst it's not one of the 5 sourcing principles, it is one of the key impact measures. It's like more families that get earning a living income and a lot less children in child labor. So our typical industry, again, the numbers, the proper study hasn't been done since 2020, but in 2020, it was about somewhere between 40 and 50% of kids working in child labor. On our farms, co-ops where we've been working with them for 3 years plus, it's less than 4%. So it's a dramatic difference by applying these 5 sourcing principles and being focused on the topic. So when we talk about being an impact company rather than a purpose-led company, purpose-led for us is the ambition, but impact is the difference you actually make. And so we kind of prefer the measure the difference. And that's why we describe ourselves as an impact company that makes chocolate, not a chocolate company that makes impact.
Yeah. And you went a step further, which is like open sourcing, or I guess maybe it's not open source, but anyone can join, right? Or maybe describe that.
So again, to give my predecessor Hanging Out a lot of credit, in 2018, 17, 18, Tony's was doing really well, but it was really clear that the amount of beans that we needed as a company was still relatively small, less than 1% of beans coming out of West Africa. And whilst people originally everyone said, oh yeah, you're a marketing company, you don't know anything about sourcing, what do you know? After kind of 10, 12, 15 years, we were getting a model that really was having impact. And so then they would say, oh yeah, but it's just a trial and it's just it wouldn't work at scale. So he was like, okay, well, how do I scale more? And the idea for OpenChain came back from, well, if I can get other people to source their beans through us as well, we can grow twice the rate and we can get to 5% of beans in West Africa. And at 5% of beans in West Africa, you'd be a similar size to fair trade, and people couldn't say that you weren't a model that was scalable. So that's the journey we're on now. So we opened it up in 2018. Albert Heijn, private label chocolate, came on board first. Since then, I think we're up to nearly 24, 25 mission allies, including Ben and Jerry's, who source their cocoa for their ice cream through us, including Waitrose in the UK, lots of other sort of
Mr. Beast
in the US, exactly. So Feastables source their cocoa through us. So again, competitors alongside us on shelf, whether in Waitrose and in Albert Heijn, I've got their private label chocolate with my Tony's OpenChain stamp on it, selling at a lower price next to my Tony's Chocolonely bars. Now, people might say, well, why would you do that? That's mad. This is your unique selling point, being sustainable cocoa. And it goes back to that statement I made at the beginning. I'm the CEO of the mission, not of the brand. The brand is one of the tools I have to drive scale, but OpenChain is in combination with the brand, 1 + 1 = 3. And so it's the combination. I make the judgments on the basis of the combination. And I made the judgment originally to say, if we open this up, the impact on the ground will be bigger. And that's exactly turned out to be the case. Nearly, I think last year, 40% of our volume was from other people. So we're kind of not quite twice as big as we would be, but nearly as a result of this approach. And so increasingly, we're very clear. if you want to solve a problem in an industry like this, where it's such an entrenched issue, you have to collaborate in the supply chain and then compete at shelf. And any other way, everyone gets their methodology and their thing. It just doesn't drive change fast enough. It doesn't tackle the issues on the ground fast enough. We have to find collective solutions, big enough and grown up enough to work together on those kind of solutions, particularly in a really difficult industry like cocoa, and then say, right, let's compete at shelf, because there's a million ways in cocoa and chocolate you can compete at shelf without having uniqueness in the supply chain.
Well, I mean, I think the brand value of Tony's is people will still see your stamp, but they'll still see the bar by Tony's. And just because of the brand and everything you stand for, they might be willing, they are willing to pay more, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, we're far from having solved the problems. We've got another 20 years ahead of us. But if we ever got there, and obviously the name Tony's, the Chocolonely part was about the lonely journey to change the industry. The less lonely we are along the way, the better, quite frankly. And we've got, as I said, 20 plus mission allies now. So we're feeling a little less lonely, but we've still got a long way to go. There's still 98% of the cocoa out West Africa, is being sourced in other ways.
Yeah. Speaking a little bit about this, like how do you influence industries and the sort of larger system? The B Corp movement was originally started with this, how do we be the best of the best, sort of top tier companies that are really leading the way to change shareholder capitalism and change the market. And at the same time, the biggest impact of the B Corp movement has often been this theory of how do we get the large player. It's not just how do we be a small, really cool group of funky people who don't really change anything. It's like, how do we actually bring in the big players? And I'm curious how you see this sort of tension in the B Corp movement, because, in the cocoa industry, I imagine there's huge players that, there's probably 3 companies that, you mentioned 90, if you're 5% is fair trade and the other, there's probably like 3 companies that are the 80% or something, or maybe you can correct me, but I imagine there's some very large players. And if they were somehow to become B Corps, it can feel to some of the early adopters and folks who want to be different that, well, why are we doing this thing if this company that I'm trying to differentiate from is like now a B Corp? Even though it may be helping change the system, it's not necessarily what I signed up for. So yeah. I guess how do you see that tension?
In the nicest possible way. I don't have a lot of time for people saying, I want this to be an exclusive club and, oh no, I'm better than you're. This only matters if we change at scale. And so, at Tony's, we have effectively our roadmap, which again existed for a long time before me. There are 3 jobs to be done. Create awareness of the problem. And for the first 15 years, all we did was talk about, do you know child labour? Do you know, while we were working on the model. The second part is lead by example, be a B Corp, work out how 5 sourcing principles can drive impact in the ground. And the third job you have to do is inspire others to act. And I think B Corps sometimes think that their job is the first 2, and they think their job is to lead by example, when actually their real job is to inspire other people to act and not be exclusive about what they've created or what they are. So I'm always a champion of bigger companies saying, okay, we've got it wrong, or we're here, this is where we are, but our commitment is to move forward from A to Z. I've always said, if I could give every corporate leader in the world, it'd be like an amnesty day to print in the newspapers, this is the shit pile we're sitting on right now, but our commitment is to go from here to here and then hold them to account on the journey, not on their starting point. And the problem is so much energy goes into sort of not releasing the starting point of whatever their mess currently is, that the energy doesn't go into moving things forward and changing, because it's like so much energy to take it up saying, wow, if the press ever got hold of that, it'd be, ugh. And then I think, yes, B Corps, Tony's, yes, our job is to show what's possible, but to inspire other people. The reason I say I have to show that it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. We have to be a successful, scale, but profitable company, because I can be as worthy as you like, and I can have a good top line. But if I'm not making any money, the big guys get another out. They say, well, it doesn't really scale and they don't make any money, so my shareholders won't wear that. So there's a reason for me to stay inactive. But if I'm profitable, scaling fast, one of the most successful fastest growing chocolate companies in the world, and making profits and showing the impact on the ground, why wouldn't you go, maybe we should do that? So my whole philosophy is everyone's welcome. And it's really hard to say, how do you measure that? And is it in this system and that system? But I want people in whatever you call the movement of commitment to change. And I think the B Corp journey is that. And I find it a really useful framework and tool to talking about getting people thinking about the good questions to ask about their part of the business. So whether you're in the people team or whether you're in the sustainability team or in the sourcing team or interacting with suppliers, what are good questions you should ask those suppliers to be thoughtful about what kind of company we're building? That's where I think its power is embedding it in the business to get hundreds of people asking good questions rather than the CEO going, did we pass? Did we get a score? Can I put that on my marketing material? It's just about changing mindset and then showing that change of mindset drives positive outcome, which there's definitely increasing body of evidence to show that B Corps outperform, certainly in the UK data that we've looked at. They're just outperforming the economy by quite a significant amount, 20% growth versus 1 or 2% growth. They hire more people, they have less burden on the state because there's less sick days, there's more capital investment per, on and on and on.
51% market awareness for consumers.
So why try and restrict that? That's my philosophy. Whether it's right or wrong, who knows? But I'm not into the keep it a niche exclusive club because we've got to drive change at scale if we're going to lead the world to a fairer and more sustainable future.
Yeah. And so to follow that, why does Tony's stay a B Corp? Like what added value because you're already so mission driven and you have the open chain and things like this. So like what additional value does B Corp provide?
I guess the point I just made, which is, but we're very deep on cocoa, but we've got lots of other bits of our business. And so how do my people team think about what are the right topics in terms of our governance? Is our governance sort of the right? And I just think B Corp's just got a useful set of questions in each area. So we might be sort of, I don't think we're even great at cocoa, but we're deep and committed to sort of getting better and better all the time at cocoa. But for me, it's just a sense check of, are you good all round? Because again, I think there's a danger that companies say, well, my one thing is this, and I'm just going to do that. And I don't care about the rest. I don't think that's credible either. So I think you have to have a kind of minimum standard good. And then the thing I really like about Tony's is then it's got its real spike in like, we're going to change the industry in cocoa. That's really powerful. But if you're then shit at the rest, it undermines things. So I like B Corp because it keeps you honest and being good all round. That's You don't need to be great at everything. But you do need to be good all round.
Yeah. To your earlier point around bringing in more folks to the club, or the I think you said I like this sort of like the pile of shit that you're sort of sitting on. What are we doing forward, right? What are we doing looking forward? I think Eric Ries, who we talked about briefly in his new book, Incorruptible, which featured Tony's, had talked about this concept of financial gravity. It's just everything is sort of constantly being funneled into just like the weight of how does this financially work? And it seems like what you're doing in the UK, because I know you're co-chair of the Better Business Act as well, you're trying to get at some of that underlying financial gravity question, or at least trying to address what the purpose of a corporation is for all companies. Because in the US, obviously, and in many countries, it's been a state-by-state voluntary approach to changing corporate law. And this is like, no, we're actually going to change the underlying UK law. So could you give folks who don't know what the Better Business Act is and some of the work that you're up to?
In simple terms, it's taking the principles of B Corp and saying, instead of that being voluntary, why isn't that just the default for corporate law? So when you set up a company, the thing that comes from Companies House, the registration says, well, you have to do it this way, which is basically as a board, a set of directors, you have to take consideration for people, profit and planet, and you have to kind of justify and explain how you thought that through. At the moment, it says maximize profits for shareholders. And if you wouldn't mind, have a think, like take these things as secondary considerations. All it says is a few simple word changes. It says you have to think about those things in balance. Now, you might still come to actually right now we've got to profit maximize, but by making you have the conversation, and we know how big companies work in particular, if that's what the law says, they will need some due diligence to show there was a board conversation about how are we balancing people, profit and planet in this particular decision. And you might still come to a harsh decision that is profit focused because you've got to protect the company, but you'll probably say, well, in doing that, actually, we could do it this way and we could protect. And so there's lots of examples where companies have hidden behind that. And to some extent, we want to change the laws to stop people hiding behind. There's a good example of the UK where this big ferry company literally, as the boats docked and the workers got off, they sacked them on the site with no notice, no whatever. And you were like, if the law had been different, they may have got to that same decision because the company wasn't doing particularly well, but they'd have probably said, well, let's give them all 2 months notice and let's do it. And so it would have just changed the approach. And whilst we want to change the law, actually it's in pursuit of changing the culture to say, slow down a bit, don't profit maximize. And when those directors turned up at the Houses of Parliament to explain themselves, because there was a big furore, they went, well, the law says I'm supposed to do this, and my lawyers advised me that I had to do it this way because I was following the law. And all the lawmakers go, oh, okay. And journalists go, oh, okay. And then guess what? It entrenches the fact that that's okay to do that. And I don't think it is. So again, we're saying we've got a good base of evidence that doing it a different way is actually better for the economy. So why don't you do the smart thing as well as the right thing and change the law for everyone? And we think we'll have a better, faster growing economy as a result. Of course, there's a lot of people that think differently from us, and there's a lot of entrenched interest in maximizing short-term profits because some big, powerful people benefit from that system. But in the long term, well, we see the consequences of that all around us: low growth, issues with the climate. And guess what? Yeah, there's a few people getting richer and richer and richer, but is that serving society in the right way? I think business is there to serve society over the long term. That's why we're pushing for it. Changing the law in any country is a long road. So again, I'm not expecting imminent change, but it gives us a voice as well, because we've got 3,000 companies, and it is allowing us to have more eye-to-eye conversations rather than just when they want to do a business case, they go and talk to the FTSE 100 and CEOs and say, oh, what do you think? And they say, oh yeah, jolly good idea. Let's do the thing that suits us. We have created a group that's got a voice in Parliament now. So I think that in itself, even without the law change, is helpful and powerful.
And so how close to any sort of vote, or like what's the sort of steps that would need to happen for something like this?
The problem is you need, particularly in this divisive political world we live in, you kind of need a centrist government that doesn't care about what the left and right there's a lot of jingoism going on at the moment. So if the left introduce it, they get called woke, and if the right clearly aren't going to introduce it because we've moved away from the centre, it's probably further away than ever in terms of, even if the left sort of believe in it, they're fearful of how it would be used against them because it's like, well, you're anti-business, which I think is completely opposite of what it means, but it will get corrupted in that way, and you see that language coming out. So it's a long road, but I'm a patient man, because for me, it's just obviously what would drive better principles and better growth in the country. Clearly, not everyone agrees with me.
Is there already a voluntary form for companies that want to do that?
Exactly. So you go online to the Better Business Act, so any company can join. And what I like is we've got a very diverse range from sort of big companies like the Virgin Group, who are very supportive of it, through to kind of coffee shops and whatever. So again, I think what we're showing is the breadth of types of companies that believe in this. This isn't a particular niche type of company, and it's not just for B Corps, it's for anybody.
Great. And what are you most excited about in the next, what's Tony's got on the roadmap, and what are some things that are you sort of looking forward to?
Yeah, look, I think driving impact is what we're all about. And so scaling the business through the brand, so which more beans equal more impact. We've got, the US business is growing incredibly fast right now, our UK business likewise. So becoming what I would call a global chocolate company is exciting. I'm just building brand and products and new innovation. We've just launched some filled bars in the UK and the US and Netherlands, which is doing really well. So just running that kind of company is fun. The thing that gives it real depth and meaning to me is like, how do we drive that into real change on the ground in West Africa? And with that collaborative spirit, trying to work more and more with the industry. And I think the crisis that the cocoa's just been through, where the prices spiked 5x, finally has woken up. I think that even the CFOs in some of these big companies say, well, if you underinvest for a long period of time and then a climate event comes along for 2 years in a row, it sucks out a huge amount of profit and value from the companies, share prices crashing, volumes dropping. Whereas if you'd invested more consistently in the farmer, in a living income price, yes, climate events are always going to move the yields, but they're not going to move them 30%. They might move them 5 or 10% because there's better disease management, there's better pruning, there's better farmer welfare. All of those things can reduce the variability as climate change comes, which creates a more consistent pricing in the industry, which stops this boom and bust thing. And seriously, a lot of people have lost a lot of money in the last 2 years. So it's like, I'm excited about making the argument for more consistent investment now, hopefully with a few more CFOs listening as well, whereas they just used to like the rock bottom pricing. They've realized there's a cost to that now, and it's come home to bite even the very biggest of companies in the last 2 years. So trying to win that argument, and as the next kind of trigger for change, and also EU deforestation legislation coming in, which means everybody has to have traceability to be able to sell in Europe. And if you've got traceability, then it's just an economic argument. Whereas in the past, they've hidden behind, well, it's just too hard to get traceability at our scale. And when it becomes legislation, guess what? They've worked out how to do it. And once you have that, it's simply an economic choice to say, do you want to pay them a living income or not? And they've always hidden behind the lack of traceability as a reason not to. Because, well, if we give it to the middleman, who knows where it goes? Whereas now it's like, well, you know your farmer, and mobile payments are coming, so you can actually even pay them direct in time. So an interesting phase for the industry where I think we can win some arguments for change. And I think increasingly those big companies are more now listening, not just with the moral argument, but with the economic argument. And if we at Tony's can bring those together, I think we can create a tipping point. And that's what ultimately excites me and motivates me. I mean, if we create a tipping point in cocoa, that would just be incredible, right? And very meaningful, and show the power of what we're trying to do. Whether we get there or not is a whole different equation, but that's what we strive for.
What would you say to folks who maybe look at Tony's and see all the amazing, work you all do with the open chain and the supply chain? There's so many layers of the company, and they feel like I'm just a more, maybe it's a service business or a simpler business, or they just don't, they see all the complexity and authenticity that you have, but they feel like the gap between where they are to like that level of what you've built is so great. How do you sort of encourage folks?
I just go, Tony didn't exist 20 years ago. Like, it was nothing. It was zero. And we weren't even trying to set up a business. The journalists weren't even trying to set up a business. And Tone was one of the journalists, but Morris and Roland, they were three journalists, became very passionate about this topic. And so I think you've got to have the passion for what's the change? Have you got passion for it? And then how do you build stuff around that and just keep layering it? And we didn't come up with the 5 sourcing principles in year 1. It took like 12 years to get it right. Like, oh, that didn't work. Try that again. Oh, we actually have to do it ourselves. Actually, we have to have our own people on the ground. And so you kind of learn as you go. And there's no magic shortcut and say, oh, just do this and it's all really easy. It's freaking hard work. Before I joined the company, 16 years of people working their backsides off trying to get this right, trying to get. So it doesn't come easy. So that's the thing. So you have to have passion for your change topic and sort of stick to your guns and keep believing. And I think people respond to the authenticity of it. Because again, we don't get everything right. Our annual report is both, yes, there's lots of things that we do right, but we're also quite honest about the things we've got wrong, or we've made a mistake here, or we've had a learning there. We're trying to sort of normalize how hard it is and some of these difficult topics as well. So talking about child labor isn't particularly fun when you're a chocolate company. It's completely kind of counterintuitive. But again, normalizing the conversation around child labor takes the fear away from hopefully other people tackling it too.
It reminds me, Eric Ries also spoke about in the Incorruptible book, this concept of harder is easier. So I feel like because you're saying, oh, we actually have to do it ourselves, and you sort of create a very difficult challenge for yourself. But then by doing it that way, the trust and all of the like goodwill and all of these sort of market forces actually reward you quite well and makes it a little easier.
And transparency is powerful in the sense that if we screw up, I can go, we screwed up. And in a weird way, people give us more credit for that bit than the bit where we go, oh, we did this really well. They're like, yeah, really? Well, I'm not sure I believe you. When you go, we screwed up, they go, oh, well, thanks for being honest. Actually, I really like you now. So, yeah, in a way, because and again, when you're a young company, you can start off like that. And again, I do feel sorry for the legacy companies because they've got a legacy and new CEO comes in and the first thing he's not going to undo is unpack all the mess that he's inherited. But we've got to create conditions for them to allow to do that, because otherwise, as I said earlier, you don't change fast enough because you spend too much energy trying to hide the pile that you've got. Whereas we started with no pile, and every time we've found a pile, we've go, oh shit, we've screwed this up, and sort of moved on from it. And then said, okay, we'll go again, we'll try something else next year. So yeah, I'm not saying it's easy, but what we need is the commitment to go from A to B. In some cases in this industry, I sense it's coming, but it's still not quite clear enough of some of the big guys saying, we're here and we really are now going to go to B from A.
Yeah. Well, just from my perspective in the US, I feel like Tony's as much credibility as Patagonia, really, which is sort of my top tier of like who has the most credibility for companies. Yeah, that's a high bar, right? That's great.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing, right? I mean, the brand's in the US is only 7 years old. Yeah. And again, I guess maybe that's part why we have credibility, because we've spent no money on marketing. I mean, I'm over 100 million of sales now in the US, and this year my marketing budget's less than $2 million. So we've spent the money doing the work, paying farmers a living income. And the nice thing about, I guess, the marketing world today, where with user-generated content and storytelling, we have a lot of stories from that fall out from that. The unequally divided bar, the advent calendar with a thing missing. We're good at creating prompts for stories, and then that generates a lot of user-generated content of people retelling the story in their way to their audience. And so we found a powerful way to build the brand through storytelling with limited resources, with user-generated content, because we're interesting, even though the key is always, you've got to have a blooming tasty product in food. Like, there's no point being everything that Tony's is and they're having a product that's like pretty rubbish, because you just don't resell. So again, making damn sure we don't forget that bit, that we have amazing products as well. It's that, and then obviously our packaging is stand out on shelf and it breaks all the category codes and is kind of disruptive. So it's that sort of triple lock on packaging, product, and what we stand for, storytelling around our ethics, that has created this unique blend that resonates.
Yeah. Maybe the last 2 questions here. One, you just touched on something that I think I was recently reading the Patagonia. There was a book called Dirtbag Billionaire that was written about Yvon Chouinard, the CEO.
Yeah.
And you just realize how obsessive he is about quality. It's not just like the impact story. It's like this guy is out 8 hours a day testing his own gear and like sleeping in it and being like, move the Velcro a quarter inch, So it's really important what you just said about quality of the product, because I feel like a lot of B Corps and others, we can lose that part for the mission.
If I was out testing chocolate 8 hours a day, I think I might have a problem. But I do a pretty good job of
what about your kids?
Of testing our products. So yeah, but that's the danger. But yeah, look, totally agree. I mean, the product has to stack up. You don't make change by being all worthy and then having a product that doesn't connect with people. I mean, ultimately, everyone's got to spend their money somehow, and they're not going to spend it on a worthy product that doesn't do the job. That's simply the case. And where Patagonia got it right, where we got it right, Innocent, very much the same, right? It was a product that was just delicious, and people believed in, the sustainability and delivered on that front as well. So
brilliant. So last question, what do you and Tony's need right now from the listeners? It's one of the questions we usually ask at the end is, how can folks support besides buying the bars, which I think everyone should do?
Yeah, so, buy the bars, unwrap the wrapper and read the story and retell the story. So inside every wrapper, and we try and rotate them a bit. So there's a different aspect to the brand of the impact story. So I guess in general, I want people to use their voice and their power. And I think people think, oh, well, that's just me. Back to your comment about I'm just a small B Corp. And, I go back to that. I'll probably butcher it, but that Anita quote of, if you don't think small can make a difference, try going to bed with a mosquito. I think we all have more power, more ability to influence, whether that's storytelling, whether that's standing up for what you believe in. And I think the world has somewhat encouraged people to either stay silent or kind of not. And I just think people should have more confidence to say, yeah, this is what I believe in. And actually, this is the company that I am going to choose and I'm going to talk about. And I think it's talking about positive brands and things you influence that then make other people discover them. And that drives the change. A brand like ours can't afford to be on TV 24/7. So we need word of mouth. We need people to champion us, to believe in us. We need policymakers to say, yeah, actually, Tony's has shown what's possible. We're going to raise the floor. We need journalists to tell our story. We need consumers to be in love with us, of course, buy our product, but also tell their friends. I mean, it's try one, sell one to someone else in terms of telling the story.
Yeah. Well, Douglas, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to have to go unwrap my 2 Tony's bars and read the story, which you got in there. So really appreciate you coming on.
Good. No, absolute pleasure. Good to talk to you.
Hey, Beyond the Bee listeners. If you're looking for even more inspiring conversations with leaders on the front lines of our movement towards just futures, be sure to subscribe to Next Economy Now, produced by the team at Lift Economy. Next Economy Now broadens the focus beyond the B Corp movement to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, democratic, equitable, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. Check out our latest episodes at lifteconomy.com/podcast. You can subscribe to Next Economy now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.